is ultimately when somebody says our process it's broken, I need to digitalize. It's not, we're not meeting our KPIs. Is this now the business process architect who says, wait a minute, okay, let's talk about it. I can help you design the process in a way that it works. Is that the business process expert, architect? Is that the business process expert? Or is it now let's come up with another role. Is that the business process analyst?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new episode of the BPM 360 podcast. My name's Casper, your host, and with me is, as always, my trusted partner, co-host, and friend, Russell. Russell, how are you? And I see no curtains. Where are you at?
Yes, it's a beautiful spring weather. It's getting dark now. I'm in the garden in my office, not mobile office. It's my garden office.
Oh, very, very nice, very nice. I'm coming to you from a hotel room in the beautiful city of Munich,
Ah,
and it's lovely to see you. And let's have a great episode today, Russell. Can I remind you where we left off last time? Because for the listeners who jump into this one, this is part number 2 of a mini series that we're doing on the most important roles in BPM. So think about roles as your executive sponsor, your program manager, your CUE lead. And today we're going to talk about the business process architect. If you want to know why we're doing that, then listen to the last couple of minutes of the first part of this miniseries. Matter of fact, you might as well listen to the entire episode, by the way. But we introduced the role of the business process architect, and we're going to talk about that role today. And maybe we touch upon another role, but I mean, this is a very important role, Russell. And before I want to pick your brain on this, let me introduce what we did in the first part as well, where we said, listen, what are, and we reached out to AI for that because we just like to play around with that. And we just asked AI, what are the most important character traits for any of these roles and what is the required experience? And I want to share with you what we got on the process architect, right? You ready for this? You're sitting down, Russell?
yeah. I'm holding tight to a table.
Okay, very good. So on the character traits of the business process architect is systemic thinking and precision. In other words, they must see both the helicopter view and the technical detail without losing coherence between them. And then before we dive into this, on the required experience side, we're looking at deep expertise in modeling. So let's say BPMN, enterprise architecture, which is really cool that pops up, and process classification frameworks like APQC, but there's many more. And then the experiencing of designing frameworks that actually have been adopted and used, not just created, which I think is a very powerful addition. I mean, Russell, let's talk about that. Let's start with the character traits. Or, I mean, let me ask you first, what do you think a business process architect is and does?
Well, yeah, before we get into that, we said, I always love these descriptions of skill sets and you go through them and you're going, wow, that's a unicorn. So
Yeah. We're always
but
trying to hire a Superman, right?
yeah, exactly. So looking at these roles and the skill sets, especially now that have been generated, you said, wow, that's a tough challenge. You see that in the job description, you said, wow, okay, you have to have a lot of confidence to step up and say, yeah, no problem. That's me.
Yeah.
Especially what I think is really good about this is, first of all, it is you have like this the depth of the skill sets coming from, as I said, like a top-down management strategic perspective on the whole architecture. So you will take it from what is the purpose of this, but down to the nitty-gritties to make it stick. So this deep expertise is going down to, there are a lot of details you have to cover when setting up a process architecture. You cannot just take, from my perspective, classification frameworks. They're fine. There are frameworks on architecture. That's something I am very passionate about, of course, as you may know.
I
But
know, I do.
a framework is a framework, and you have to adopt this to your organization to make it stick.
Yeah.
And that is,
Yeah.
I think, the real challenge. So it's not just being particular and, let's say, knowing academia around a process architecture in general. but it's then bringing it to the live, filling it with content and
Yeah.
filling it with meaning in the context of your initiative and your organization. And I think that's quite a that's quite a task. But again, we I think we touched this as we did the introduction of this last
Hmm.
episode. I think you really have to look at this role and what it brings to the initiative along the phases of where you are.
Yeah.
And I think the
True.
fundamental value is during setting up the process architecture. And we all know that process management is a journey. The process of process management is always moving, and you always have to adopt your architecture and extend your methodology depending on the use cases with the maturity of your organization and with the disruptions you have in your business. There is always a moving aspect here, but the critical element is during the initiation phase of the program. Say when you're introducing BPM into your
Hmm.
organization, or you're doing a review and you're revamping it, that you really start collecting all the different aspects, that influencing aspects, and taking them along. And now I see this is a big challenge. Can you do this alone? Where's this unicorn? And in how far can such a person that is, let's say, so skilled and precise
Hmm.
and has a high level of abstract thinking, also capable of communicating what he's intending to do, that the people get it, so that it sticks. Because it doesn't matter how well thought out your business process architecture is, ultimately you also have to look at the different, let's say, with a certain like process empathy for all the
Hmm.
participants in this game, and thinking of what level, say the process architecture, what level do they feel comfortable? What level gives them real value? Which level of, say, abstract or detailed knowledge in the process architecture is just about the sweet spot to serve them and they can serve? Because everybody is
Hmm.
like
Yeah.
putting in and taking out. And this is what I think is a real balancing act, to understand how to take people along
Hmm.
and give them, let's say, ultimately everybody what they need and everybody what they can cope with, and communicate it as well.
Yeah. 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 I agree. Yeah. And obviously, I mean, when we talk about the role of business process architect, if you do a company-wide rollout, or even if you start with a pilot and you have more than one functional area, you typically end up with more than one business process architect, right? It's not a single person that can do everything, because you expect these people to go deep, not only to have the helicopter view, but also to go deep into a functional area. My experience is that there are only, in rare cases, people that can cover more than one or two functional areas to a sufficient level of depth at the same time. I mean, I can cover procurement pretty good, but I can't cover finance or marketing and sales, or many other functional areas. I might have a intermediate knowledge of supply chain or manufacturing or quality management, but if you really need to go deep, you need to find that person that has that knowledge. So at the moment that you say you need to be you need to have precision, you very quickly go into the situation where you say you probably need more than one, depending a little bit on the phase of the rollout that you're in, right? But even if you have a business as usual and you finish the rollout of your process management project, you're still going to probably need more than one.
Yeah, that's a good aspect, and I think what you're touching a topic where I think maybe we have to just align on what we see as the key responsibilities, more or less depending on the phase of the initiative here.
Hmm.
So
All right.
there is like this gliding line between. So what does the business process architect, let's say, versus the expert? So
Hmm.
from my
Okay.
understanding, the architect is, especially during the initiative, it is, and that I think the trades were mentioning that they have to know classification framework. So they have to have, first of all, you do need to set up your process architecture end to end and functional. It
Hmm.
has to be cohesive. And then going into specific domains, you have to start, let's say, you don't just build the rooms and the walls, but you also start doing some basic, let's say, waterworks and electrical
Mhm.
lines. You're not filling the full
Yeah.
content. You're not doing the decoration and the fancy.
Yeah. 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 No, I agree.
But you are starting on that level. So I do. I'm with you to say there is like this fundamental understanding of the domain, and that's why typically you won't have one business process architect covering all domains. You will start reaching out and looking at the specifics of the domain. But then the question is, where does say the architect stay an architect, then you get the experts in to do to bring in the content, and how much content domain knowledge is required by the architect. I think that's a big
But
it's a real
so this is
challenge.
interesting. Russell, this is interesting. So what we're now basically describing is that there's some sort of I see a matrix in front of me now, which basically says I have functional domains. Let's put that on the columns. And then I have the required level of expertise in the rows. And the question really becomes, on what level do I expect a process architect to be proficient on?
Mm.
I mean, if I talk about a title called architect, I always immediately think back to the analogy that I always go back to, and that's building a house. If I talk to an architect, he can sketch me a house that looks absolutely fantastic. And he can sell me the idea, this is what your new house is going to be, and this is how we're going to do the layout, and this is where you'll find your kitchen, your bathroom, your bedrooms, and everything, right? If I translate that into a business process architect, he can sell me or she can sell me the vision on you need to have these functions in your domain, let's say finance or HR or manufacturing, operations, whatever. Um, but when the rubber meets the road and I start asking questions like, yeah, but how does that really look like? So in my analogy of the house, how does it really look like? Where are my power outlets in the rooms? Where do my pipes come out of the wall? Then very often it's not the architect anymore. You're talking to an expert from the contracting firm that's going to build your house. In other words, you're going to talk to a subject matter expert from the functional domain. So where is that cutoff point? And more importantly, and let's make it just more complicated, if you're starting up a project, do you expect the person that has the role of the process architect to basically also be the subject matter expert? And when
Mm.
is the point when is that moment in time where you say, I now need to make a distinction between these two roles and actually assign it to two different people?
So I don't know in how far we're going to overstress your analogy with the architects, and when we're going to so because I know architects that of course are deep down into construction, and they know well that's not going to work, so they plan the electrical lines as well, and so they,
Absolutely.
they also are into details. When it's they wouldn't have a good hand
True. True.
necessarily for it, but they would we still say well interior design. Nah, they suck at interior design. You need somebody, to really fill it with life. So even there
Yeah.
in your analogy, there will
True.
be this cutoff, and typically to coordinate I would say, but this is more like getting it done. So the construction head of construction and the construction company, they know how to sequence out the tasks and really get, that they know what kind of concrete how you need to mix
Yeah.
it and how to contract that. But so let's not too overstress the analogy, but still, I think it's super helpful to get. But we have to
I
now go down to the process management. And one thing I think the architect or the architects, the business process architects, do help when it's about orchestrating the business processes in the context of the business and the BPM strategy. And so the architecture that they build up as a framework is something they say, okay, to achieve this goal, you need 5 stories or else you're not going to have enough food. Yeah. And to have 5 stories, you need these pillars. And for 5 stories and 5 families, these are the amount of toilets you need. And we need to plan this out. So on that
Yeah. Yeah.
level,
Yeah.
a business process architect is really saying, hey, wait a minute, what domains do we have? What is the business model? What structures do we need? And that's where they're in their 100% in their domain of business process
Yes.
architects. But then I think also when everybody comes in and says, "Way, I'm going to do the bathroom green and I'm going to do, this here," that's also when the business process architect says, hold on. There is a
Yeah.
cohesive structure and idea behind this house that we have to stick to. Or else, I think the Germans in architecture, I think they call it künstlerische Oberleitung. Yeah. So he's not going into the interior design, but he is
No.
keeping the picture that the whole cohesive house doesn't become a complete mess when people start, the interior design start filling it all. And then the doors are black here, and they're white there, and the
Hmm.
carpet is red here, and then you open up and the kitchen is green. So they keep this cohesive consistency coming from a grand design to make it a luxury hotel or a cottage. And that's something where a business process architect is down to, and I think he does take over a role. And that's where maybe we have to look through the other roles that you have. But in this whole
Yeah.
end to end, I would say, to say the orchestration of processes for the matter of what we want to achieve from a BPM initiative, but also from a business strategy. That's definitely
But
something I think that is also the business process architect, or is
mhm.
there another role that takes on that? Where are
Well,
the boundaries of the business process architect?
I think that still is the business process architect, to be
Mm-hmm.
honest. But I really like your analogy, and that's why this analogy works so really well. Because the first thing that popped into my head, Russell, that I want to get your opinion on is at the moment that you build a house or an apartment building, we all accept without any fight the mandate and the experience and the knowledge of an architect and saying, wait a minute, you're all asking now 7 different things that are conflicting to each other. This is what we're going to do, right? We all accept that really
Mm-hmm.
easily because we realize as regular people, this is where the expertise is.
Mm-hmm.
Translating that to business process management, and I am a business process architect that needs to convince 7 business units that this is the way that we're going to be doing it because you're all asking for different things. That is a completely different fight.
Mm-hmm.
And why is that? Because probably that business process architect has a similar amount of expertise and knowledge as your architect in the house analogy. And still, the business process architect has to fight, I think, a magnitude of 10 or 100x harder to get the same point across and get the same alignment from different business groups because I don't know why, actually. Do you have any idea why that is? Because it is reality, what I'm just the picture I'm painting.
Well, I think
I've been there. I've
that's
been
a
a business process architect.
situation in society. There's certain, I think, jobs that have a high acceptance and nobody messes. So doctors, as soon as you put on a white
Yeah, yeah,
dress and
yeah.
you're a doctor, then people don't question you too much, even in the day and times of AI. Maybe that's changed now. So ChatGPT says I don't have cancer, but and
Yeah.
then and I think
Well,
I
good luck with that.
yeah, well, okay, fine. And I think the architects
Yeah,
in it as as a as a as a job, they've always had they've had a good lobby. They've had a good lobby, and I think the way that the education is set up,
yeah,
and they have their own what's it called, handelskammers. They have their own like trades. That there is like a clear, if you go and study architecture, and you got your diploma in architecture, that nobody messes with you. Now, that's maybe something that's missing with a business process architect. There's no education or
yeah,
a trade or a diploma in business process architecture. It's just somebody like me coming around
yeah.
and says,
You're right.
I'm a business process architect. This says, yeah, me too. So what makes you a business process architect that I can't say? Who are you? So in the analogy, maybe that's something we need to talk about. So where are these certificates that are really accepted from university or from any other institute that really
Yeah,
legitimate somebody
yeah,
to
yeah. That's
become
a
a
good one.
business process architect? So that's something that I think is the reason why in all our roles we're talking about, there's no real qualification. And if there is one, it's not really anything that is really, really accepted. That
So that's an interesting sidestep, Russell.
totally
That means that
sites.
the only The only sorry, um, the only real association I know on that front is the Association of BPM Professionals, ABPMP. And I know one of their vice presidents. So let's get that person on the show so we can ask this question.
Well, in Germany, they have TÜV certificates for process managers as well. So, and that's typically an instance for at least having your car.
You have TÜV certificates for everything in Germany.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
maybe that doesn't quite gain the acceptance of having something like an MBA or, or a diploma.
Let me reach out to the ABPMP Association to see if they can help us.
Yeah, let's
Because I
get
think
back
that's
on
an
track with
interesting
our role. Okay, let's
sidestep.
get back on
Yes.
track with our.
Yes. Yeah. I get you. I get you.
So,
is there?
but
I mean,
let's get back to your topic. So, because you spun off in a direction, and you need to now answer in a specific business process management initiative. How far do
mhm.
you expect the business process architect to, and you said modeling expertise, to actually model processes to down to which level? Is he modeling? Is he
I
giving guidance on the conventions? Is he filling the content? So, what is
yeah,
your
good.
expectation?
Okay. Yeah. Let me give you my 2 cents. I think that, but it really depends on how luxuriously staffed your project is. But
Hmm.
let's assume for a second that you run a big program and you have a business process architect for each functional domain. Let's start with that assumption.
Okay.
Um, at the moment that you start your program, I think the business process architect, in terms of how deep that needs to go, I would say certainly level 1, 2. So your architecture needs to be set up by the architect, which makes sense, just
Hmm.
even from a naming perspective.
Hmm.
I would even say that your business process architect needs to have a certain understanding of the level 3. That's your process flows.
Hmm.
If you go deeper, you need a subject matter expert. I would say that is I say that the level 3 is the point where the expert and the architect come together and
Hmm.
do the handoff.
Okay. Okay.
So I don't think you can expect from an architect that he knows every little detail about a process or a collection of processes. I think that would be too much to ask. I do, however, think that the architects, if you have multiple of them, among them need to align on these are the conventions and the modeling definitions that we use, and then
Okay.
apply that within his or her functional domain.
Okay.
Is that way off where you're coming from, or are
No,
you
I think that's
sort of aligned with that?
I'm absolutely fine with that. So let's take another question in that direction of the. So where is the business process architect allocated?
You mean hierarchically, or
Yeah, and do we have? Is he part of the center of excellence, or is he somebody that is like? Do you recruit them and have them
oh,
like dashed line to the?
if you have the luxury of having them in your center of excellence, that is the preferred place for them to be, in my
Okay,
opinion.
okay. So
So let me just so I think that if you because this is and we might be slightly having a risk of sidestepping here, but very briefly in the setup of your COE in
hmm.
your center of excellence, that's not where they might be. They might be in a larger group, which I would let's say, call it process services or process advisory and services, whatever you want to call that, where you
Okay,
have a group of centralized architects slash experts that you can use throughout your organization. I mean, that really is you're at a maturity level that's quite high if you manage to do that. If you don't have that, I can also imagine that they would be part of a business group, and you say, listen, you're the most experienced person within the company. I know that you're working for business group 1 or division 2, but you have the label of being the business process architect for finance. And you can also help other business units and business groups to achieve that. That would be fine too, but ideally, I would say you have a centralized group where you group your process architects into a COE. What say you?
yes. So I also believe that they are a fundamental part of the COE because jointly, if it's one or several, jointly they need to agree upon let's say the house, the size of the house, and everything belonging to it. And they will also be the people that
Hmm.
have a strong say down to the level of let's say the conventions, and they need to be aligned on
Yeah.
aspects of the granularity of how processes are documented. And I think these also the people that will take on new aspects and extend methodology and architecture and conventions? Is that somebody else, or is that also in the role of the business process
I would
architect?
know that's somebody else, I think.
Hmm.
I think now because what you're now basically doing is you're moving from content into methodology. And I do think, and we have that role on the list, by the way. I think it's called, let me just quickly check in my notes. Let me very quickly check my notes because I'm getting too old for this. There is a BPM technology and tooling. No, that's not the one I'm looking for.
That's the tool. Yeah.
I would have expected a methodology role here. Sorry, a
Yeah.
methodology role in your COE, which I would call the methodology owner, which is a role, not a position. I mean, there is a transition point where an inflection point where you say, I'm now dealing with content versus I'm dealing with the way that we actually do our modeling and documentation efforts, which is completely function agnostic. And that the process experts and architects, I would say, are by definition function relevant and function specific.
Oh. Hmm. Hmm.
Having said that, I do think that process architects need to
Hmm.
have knowledge about methodology, but
Of
I don't
course.
necessarily think that they would be the ones defining it.
Hmm.
They might be the ones giving input to the methodology owner saying, this is how we do it now. Based on our experience, we might need to expand our meta model or our modeling conventions because of blah, blah, blah. But I mean, I don't think that they are primarily responsible for that.
So the level structure in a process architecture, do you define that
Yeah, that's a good one.
independent from content? Is that methodology? Is that
Uh,
part of the process architect, or is that something that is part of the methodology, and it's something like something that's
oh,
dependent in upon it? I think that's where I'm struggling. That's where I'm
yeah,
the
you know
word
how to have
architect.
to.
I think with architecture, I always get confronted with end to end versus functional, 3 or 4 levels, what belongs on each level. And then you
Yeah,
come down to the
so
model types that you use there. That's then the conventions and the detailed
yeah,
methodology. But typically,
we need
as
to
a
spend.
starting point,
Yeah, we need to
that's
spend an episode on the process hierarchy, I think. But let me just give you my 2 cents. I think that the way you structure your process hierarchy is something that is defined by the methodology owner.
okay.
Do we do level 1, 2, 3, or what level 1, 2, 3, 4? And how do we define level 1, 2, 3, 4? Defining what actually is the content of level 1, 2, 3, 4 for a functional domain, that's a process architect again.
Ah,
Because then you go
okay.
back to content. I think there's a very strong separation between content and defining the method. Now, don't get me wrong, if you're starting small in a project, it might very well be that you have one person that is both the methodology owner and also happens to be a process architect for a certain domain.
Yeah, yeah,
Completely fine.
yeah,
The
and
more
absolutely
mature you
with
get, probably your methodology owner will be a separate person.
yes, and I think we have to definitely issue that disclaimer again and again that we're talking roles, and in a lot of
Yes.
organization, people
Yes.
have several hats. So it's more about the what are the tasks and the skill sets and what is the job associated to these disciplines. I also heard once a customer saying that needs to be
Yeah.
tackled
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and put them in perspective, and how, depending on the size of the initiative and the speed, you then actually have positions that you then say, okay, your skill set, your architect and methodology, that's your thing, fantastic. And some people are then more around, let's say, structuring the content. But then to be honest, I think for me, the takeaway in this discussion with you around the business process architect is that you definitely tend more to a definition that is nearer on content to a certain extent, somehow
Mhm.
attached to a domain. If this is end to end or functional, that will then manifest itself to which level of detail I think this business process architect will then go. If he's pure finance,
Yeah.
he will
Yeah.
be looking at
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
differently than somebody who is then a business process architect around order to cash. So there will be different
Yeah.
aspects and
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
the content that will be taken. But
True.
ultimately, we do agree that these business process architects are typically assigned more to the center of excellence. And therefore, when it really goes down to getting down to all the details of the content, there will be the role of the business process expert playing a more
Yeah.
vital
I
role in
think that that's a role
filling
that we need to
in the details.
introduce. Yeah. Yeah.
And
I agree
then,
with that, Russell. I
but
agree.
and it is more than just a modeler. That's also very, I think, super important. So when we're talking about
Yes.
business process architect, this is not
Yeah.
just a fancy name for a modeler, which
I
is a role
totally agree. Yeah.
I'm not saying I don't like it, but I say it's like many, many years ago, I heard hearsay that you had people writing letters for you that you maybe dictated or something like that. So you had a typist, and then
Uh-huh.
that's not a job anybody does anymore. Yeah, because you have Word and you have a keyboard,
No.
and you type your own emails, you even type your letters.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think with modeler,
Yeah.
I always say if the way sometimes people think they need a modeler, then it's like, yeah, you're too lazy to sit down and do it yourself. That's why you have somebody doing it, but it's not really a role. It's like, it's
Yeah. Yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're actually the asset, the task of designing a process, and therefore this manifesting the design in a process model as part of the documentation is
Yeah.
something that the ultimate work lays in the design of the process and not in the just sitting in front of a tool and modeling it.
Yeah.
We have to go down that path more detail when we cover this role.
Yeah. We
It may
do.
pop up on your
Yeah. We
list,
will.
but I always think it's too that's where the borderline. If you call it business process architect, I think that is nice. Yeah, it sounds good. It
Yeah.
sounds and it is something around. So
Fancy.
we need to think about then. So is ultimately when somebody says our process is it's broken. I need to digitalize. We're not meeting our KPIs. Is this now the business process architect who says, wait a minute, okay, let's talk about it. I can help you design the process in a way that it works. Is that the business process architect? Is that the business process expert? Or is now let's come up with another role. Is that the business process analyst?
Oh, bloody hell. Yeah.
Yeah. So you see the
We're
BPM, it's just,
gonna worry about that in the next one.
yeah, but you see that there's I think that's a big challenge really, that there's so many different there is no D norm, yeah, on BPM roles.
Oh yeah. Oh, here
So
we go again. Yeah. Yeah.
we
Yeah.
need to go to the TÜV and we need to talk to them. That we need to have a standardized catalog of officially accepted BPM roles. Yeah. So we
Yeah.
don't have to go down this endless
Yeah.
discussion again and again. But that's
Yeah.
exactly what happens. I mean, this is why we're talking. And I think, I hope
Yeah.
that nobody's listening says, these idiots, they've been doing this for years and they haven't come up with 100% clear definition of these are the roles and these are the only roles, and this is very clear, distinguish what these roles do. So people must be listening to this episode and saying, how the hell? They've got no clue at all. They've got no clear, concise idea of the BPM roles and what they have to do, and that they could just be announced, communicated, nominated, and get it going. How come, Caspar? Tell me.
Russell, I need to stop you there. Did you channel your inner German for this last part? You must have. Jesus,
Totally.
but we need to wrap this up. We need to wrap this up. Not just because one of the things is that I actually need to go somewhere. I'll sneak preview. I'll be meeting one of the three Prozessphilosophen in a little while. And while I'm in
Okay.
Munich, which is always a good thing to look forward to. So I'll tell you more about that later. For now, the next episode that we'll be doing, Russell, is I'm not going to go directly into that rabbit hole of process architect, analyst, expert. The next one that we're going to be recording on this is about the change management lead that
Oh,
you need.
nice. Yeah, that's a good because
That's going to be the next one. So I'm going.
that's very decoupled. And just to summarize as well, before we log
Yes.
on, so I think we very much agree upon the business process architect, the how important he is,
Yes.
the aspect of digging in, really understanding, say the whole concept around process management, the architecture with the levels, even if he hasn't ultimately designed them initially, but he carries that to the process experts to get a solid design and modeling in place. Even
Yeah.
if he doesn't do the analyst job of analyzing it, but he will facilitate that in a manner that there will be a very
Yeah.
good outcome. So I think that it's a super vital role.
Yeah.
And there are all these facets around this role that depends on the people how they fill the role. That's what why there is no
Yeah.
one
Absolutely true.
unique definition, because I think we want to make these roles fit to the people and fit to the organization and to their needs, and that's why ultimately,
Yeah.
as a message here, my inner German now turned off. I think concerning this, we have to always look at the initiative, the human side of it, the capabilities, and we need to make them fit and stick in an organization. And for that reason, even a
Yeah.
framework of roles is a framework that needs to be adopted to reality. And that's what we do day to day.
True. True. Let's talk about that next time, Russell. Absolutely wonderful.
Fantastic.
To everybody else listening to this rambling of two old geezers, thanks for sticking with us on this process architect journey. Let's reconvene in the next episode where we're going to be talking about the change management lead. Russell, thanks very much, my friend. It was a pleasure. See you next time.
Thanks for listening. Take care. Bye bye.
All right. Cheers.